I like to keep 2 buckets of liquid stripper on hand, one that I use over and over again, and one that I save for a final rinse.
Kurt, I've been brushing the hardware with this brush. It's fantastic. Where'd you get it?
Well, you can get those at any hardware store or a grocery store in the pots and pans section.
Great.
Once you've broken up the remaining pieces of paint with the brass bristles, an old paintbrush makes a pretty good agitation tool.
I'm using a squeegee here to wipe away the excess liquid stripper.
Yeah, it's best to get a non-painted squeegee. That way the chemicals in the solvent won't strip its paint too.
When working with veneer, if you work quickly, you won't have any chance of the stripper seeping into the cracks and lifting away the veneer.
Now that all this paint is removed, I'm going over this frame with a final wash of liquid stripper. It acts as a final rinse and will remove all the film. See this? It's called paint haze, and it's caused by a little bit of paint in the solvent. Many times it's so transparent, especially on light woods, you never see it till you go to apply your final finish.
One good way to get into the cracks is to take a paper towel and wrap it around a putty knife like this.
And these paper towels do a great job of soaking up the stripper, and they're cheaper than rags. Here's a neat trick. This is a standard medical syringe with a 20-gauge needle, and we filled it with carpenter's glue. And this will help us get the glue underneath this piece of veneer. By pressing down, I can wipe up the excess glue that oozes out of this crack. Then put wax paper over it and weight it so the wood will be pressed together while the glue is drying. In checking for repair, look for any nicks, chips, gouges, or screw holes that should be filled before sanding. Here's one. Take a dab of wood dough and wipe it in the hole. What you want to look for in a patching compound is one that dries fairly quickly, can sand easily, and one that will absorb stain. The next step in refinishing is sanding. Stripping closes the grain of the wood. So if you want your stain and finish to penetrate the wood evenly, you'll first open up the grain by sanding. And if the wood has been stained, stripping may have caused uneven streaks in the wood. So sanding will help even out the discoloration and make the stain you're going to apply later uniform. A light sanding will erase any scratches or blemishes in the wood as well. For all-purpose refinishing, an orbital sander is the most popular power tool. There are a lot of orbital sanders in the market today that oscillate at 4,000 orbits per minute. But for good cutting action, you'll want one that oscillates at 8,400 orbits per minute. You will find that the more oscillations per minute, the less swirl marks and scratches appear in the wood. You don't have to press hard. Just keep equal pressure and use quick, even sweeps. Some veneers are paper thin, so be careful.
When selecting sandpapers are graded according to grits. Grits are the size particles coating the paper. The higher the number, the finer the particle. For furniture refinishing, you'll want to use 100 or 120 grit paper, and change your paper frequently. Now, I'm using a rubber sanding block here, but I'd also like to keep different wooden shapes around for sanding curved and recessed moldings.
I'm done vacuuming up the sawdust from sanding, and now I'd like to talk about the next step. This is a part of furniture refinishing that people like the most, and for good reason. Up till now, everything we've done has been a kind of a cleanup process. Stripping off the old finish, cosmetic repairs, patching and sanding, all in preparation for the new stain and finish. Now it's a matter of the appearance you want. You may find the color of the bare wood attractive as it is. So that just means adding a coat of transparent finish. Or you may want to enrich the grain pattern or darken the overall tone of the wood with a stain. It's generally felt that certain woods, like mahogany, cherry, rosewood, and walnut, would lose their inherent beauty if stained. But then again, that's a matter of personal preference. Let's go to Avian, who will illustrate how we made our decisions.
One way to see what wood will look like with a clear finish is to rub a small section with mineral spirits. Mineral spirits will dry quickly but won't raise the grain like water can. So you see what it'll look like without the stain. Now in choosing our final stain for the buffet, we selected 3 shades we like and sampled them on a piece of white oak.
Stain is a method of wood coloration. All I'm going to do is brush it on, letting the wood absorb it even and smooth into its pores, and then I'll wipe up the excess. You'll notice that I'm not using a rag to apply the stain. I prefer a brush because I can work the stain into the corners and grooves much easier. Here again, good ventilation is important, and so is good lighting, so you'll see every square inch of the raw wood you're trying to cover.
The longer you leave the stain on, the deeper the penetration and the darker the final color. For control, we don't want to leave the stain on any longer than 5 minutes. You can always add more to your satisfaction. Now, to make sure that you've wiped away all the excess stain, you can wipe across the grain with a clean cloth. And if there are no streaks, it's clean.
What we're going to do is put on a coat of sanding sealer and 1 coat of varnish. In the old days, shellac was used as the first finish coat. However, shellac is hard on brushes and it's hard to sand. Varnish is also tough sanding and it takes a long time to dry. Sanding sealer was invented to solve the problems of both shellac and varnish. It's a transparent sealer that's put on the wood to firm up the little fuzz and wood fibers that stick up after stripping and sanding. With sanding sealer, it's easier to sand the wood smoother than you can any other way. If you're using a polyurethane finish, sanding sealer isn't recommended because there won't be any adherence and the polyurethane will peel off. All right, we'll let this sealer dry overnight and then we'll do a little light sanding.
I've just completed a light sanding with 220 grit paper, and after vacuuming, I'm going over with this tack cloth to remove any dust that the vacuum might have missed. We want to make absolutely certain that the surface of the buffet is free from any particles before we apply our clear finish. The smoother the finish, the longer it will last. There'll be less friction when cleaning and fewer places for dirt to get caught. Feel that?
Nice.
Super smooth. Looks great.
There are numerous kinds of finishes on the market, from lacquers and varnishes to polyurethanes and penetrating oils. And they come in varying degrees of sheen, from high gloss and semi-gloss or satin to matte or dull finish. We're going to use a satin finish on our chairs and buffet. It's durable, waterproof, and good looking. Plus it has a slow drying time which will give us control over any buildup or lap marks that might cause problems with a quick drying finish.
For ease of application, it's best to try and work on a horizontal surface. Now I'm going into the bucket a lot rather than overloading my brush. And I'm not slapping it on either. Too much varnish or an aggressive application can stir up bubbles. I try and keep a smooth, steady stroke. When working around these carvings and into crevices, I want to apply a uniform coat with a minimum of runs. Then I go back over with a dry brush to smooth out the beaded areas and depressions. Doesn't that look magnificent?
I was just showing Avian where I found the date of the buffet. The name of the manufacturer is stamped here on the back of the mirror, 1905.
Isn't that neat? It's like uncovering an old relic from history and giving it new life.
Yeah, we really had quite an adventure as we worked, discovering what kind of wood the buffet was made with, seeing which stain brought out the grain the best, and then discovering the date on the back of the mirror.
And having shared the do-it-yourself refinishing process with you, As well as having learned a few new skills ourselves, we feel ready to tackle an even larger project.
I'm Kurt Burbick.
And I'm Avian Rogers.
And thanks for being with us.